Good evening. This is our 16th class in the certificate course in eco-theology. We have been studying eco-concepts in Bible. Our resource books are 5 volumes of Earth Bible edited by Reverend Dr. Norman C. Habel. Reverend Dr. Pakim T. Shamuel, the director of the Henry Martin Institute, Hyderabad, has agreed to present the eco-concepts in Acts and Romans today. Unfortunately, he informed me yesterday that he has to attend an urgent meeting at Calcutta today. He requested for a date change. Hence, I have taken up the task to present a general topic, the church and climate justice today. In addition to the regular participants of this course, some guests are also attending today's class. I acknowledge the presence of Professor P.G. Philip and some other friends. Today's class will be of 45 minutes duration. Today's topic is church and climate justice. Christians join the psalmist in proclaiming the earth is Lord and all that is in it. Psalms 24 verse 1. However, the current climate crisis is accelerating ecological instability, which results in the loss of habitats that are homes for millions of species, including humans whose homes are at risk due to climate conflict, loss, and damage. In one of the meetings of bishops in Africa, one bishop said, "Let us pray for rain." Immediately, another bishop said, "Bishop, do not pray for rain, because before praying, we must stop deforestation. Here, God has no role. We are with the people, engaged with the deforestation. Before making any request to God, we must do our role." Another comment is stop preaching. 3 church heads, Patriarch Bartholomew, Canterbury Archbishop Welby, and Pope Francis, have offered invaluable leadership in issuing statements during the season of creation. But their statement, released just before the world leaders gather at the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, to debate steps to combat the climate crisis. Reverend Fletcher Harper, in an article, mentioned that they failed to specify who is truly responsible for the climate emergency and what really must change. He is saying that no meaning in this preaching without mentioning the culprit. We face a climate emergency because the fossil fuel industry has put its own profits above the well-being of the people and planet. Industrial agriculture, responsible for massive deforestation and violating indigenous rights, is also to blame. Governments have outright supported the destruction or played both sides of the fence. We must be good stewards of creation, or our faith teaches us to protect the earth. But we have diplomatic relations with those who are responsible for climate change. Hence, stop this type of preaching. Creation story. In Genesis, God gives us an idea regarding the habitat for various creations. In a broader perspective, the creation story can be paraphrased in this form. God created land, water, vegetation, and animals, and allotted habitats also for various species. For wild animals and poisonous animals, God allotted forests in the mountain and hilly areas. As God is aware of the importance of forests in sustaining life, he expected that the presence of poisonous animals would prevent others from entering the forest. God permitted water to flow in low-lying areas, and it became the habitat of aquatic animals. God gave geographically middle part to human beings and domestic animals as he might have visualized a rhythm. Forests are producing oxygen by absorbing the carbon dioxide produced from the plains. The rain falling in the forest is harvested and is allowed to flow as streams for the well-being of God's creation in plains and valleys. Water from the oceans evaporates and moves as clouds and rain over the forests to repeat the cycle. There also we can see this rhythm. One of the inevitable results of this cyclicity is that all living and non-living are interconnected and involved in a constant give and take. Every living organism accepts something either from the organisms or from the environment, and in return gives something to it. Human beings can use everything as food except poisonous plants and poisonous animals. You must not eat fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. This verse can be paraphrased like this: you must not eat poisonous plants and animals that are available in plenty, and should not enter into Shola forest, or you will die. Human beings entered the animal space, that is forest. Animals lost their habitats and became refugees. Who made animals refugees? Man. Undoubtedly, with this greed to exploit natural resources. In turn, the animal refugees protest by attacking human beings and their agriculture. Moreover, human beings eat poisonous animals like snakes, scorpions, crocodiles, etc. And consequently, virus and bacteria in the poisonous animal enter another habitat, the human body. I would like to explain the above points through two parables. Jesus communicated complex thoughts to the common man through simple stories now known as parables. Parables gives the essence in its simplest possible way. What a wonderful teacher was Jesus. Can parables be used today to do the same? A parable retold from Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 to 27, and Luke chapter 6, verse 46 to 49. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man who built a house on the plains firmly founded on solid rock. When the floods came, the torrent struck the house, stood firm, because it was well built on the plains allotted to human beings by God. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on a low-lying areas allotted to water. When the torrent struck the house, they were compelled to leave the house. When they called me, Lord, Lord, help us from the deluge. But one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on high ranges. The hillside saturated by continual heavy rainfall resulted in landslides. Excessive cutting down of trees had already destroyed existing mechanical root structure of the hills. When the landslides occurred, those who constructed houses on high ranges as well as their houses were buried under earth. They didn't even get a moment to call me Lord, Lord. But one who hears my words is like a man who follows the rhythm of nature, which is the rhythm of God. God created the earth and allotted separate spaces for land and water. The highest part of the land, which is full of thick vegetation, was given to the wild animals for their habitat. The low-lying land and valleys where water flows were given to the aquatic life, and the central part of the land were given to the human beings and domestic animals. The wise builders maintained the rhythm of the earth, thus making it a paradise for all species. The foolish builders disrupt the rhythm of the earth and make it a hell for all. The second story is Good Samaritan. Story of Good Samaritan. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what I must do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? He replied, how do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a farmer was going from his farmyard to the lonely place to escape from the moneylenders. He took much money from the financiers for sustaining his land cultivation. As per the advice of modern agriculture scientists, he used a lot of fertilizers and pesticides to sustain his cultivation. In spite of all his efforts, his land didn't give good harvest. As his land and house was pledged to the financiers, he had to flee from the village. On his way, he fell into the hands of the financiers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Nobody came to help him. Everybody passed by on the other side. But an environmentalist, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine. He took him to an inn and stayed with him and to hear the sad story of a farmer in a modern world. Next day, he took the farmer to a forest. The farmer was happy to see the serene beauty of the forest. The farmer asked the environmentalist, "Who is cultivating this land?" "God," replied the environmentalist. "Yes, this is God's farmland." "How is God cultivating here?" the farmer asked. "Dear friend, nature has a rhythm. If your rhythm matches with the rhythm of nature, then you will be a successful person. We can see the rhythm of God only through the rhythm of nature. If your rhythm cannot match with the rhythm of nature, you will fail in your career and you will end in suicide. In the forest, there is a natural way of cultivation without using the practices of modern agriculture. Is agriculture possible without fertilizers and pesticides?" asked farmer. "Yes, friend. When you use chemical fertilizers and pesticides, you are killing the microbes which are enhancing the nutrient value of the soil. We are upsetting the rhythm of the nature by adding toxins to the land. The multinational companies who produce these fertilizers and pesticides need profit. Hence, they advise the farmer to add more and more fertilizers and pesticides to enhance the yield. Every artificial enhancement has a limit. When you add more and more chemicals, all the microbes will vanish from the land, which will result in desertification. The trees you see in the forest are stronger than the trees you grow by adding chemical fertilizers. Do not poison your land because it belongs to God." Environmentalist continued, "As the trees are growing tall as they can, sunlight cannot fall on the bare ground. It is a planned architecture of God. Where there are no tall trees, there will be grass on the ground. In God's cultivation, God will not allow sunlight to fall directly on the bare ground. When sunlight falls on the ground, sun's energy will be transferred to the land. When the temperature of the land increases, microbes, which enriches the nutrient value of the soil, will die. When microbes completely vanish, desertification starts. Land is the womb of life. In God's cultivation, God retains the life, giving power of the land. In nature's rhythm, land always prefers to have a green cover. When the energy of the sun falls on the green cover, it is converted to carbohydrates, which in turn becomes the food for all living creatures. Do you know where the poisonous creatures live?" the environmentalist asked. "No," the farmer replied. "That is the central part of the forest, the thickest part of the forest. These creatures are the guards of God to keep the forest as such. In other words, they are guarding the forest, resisting all attacks which upsets the rhythm of nature." The environmentalists further explain the silent features of God's cultivation. If you ask the teak, "Where is your neighbor?" it will be the mahogany tree. The mahogany will say that its neighbor is rosewood. Rosewood say jack tree. In God's cultivation, there is multi-crop cultivation, whereas modern cultivation promotes only monocrop cultivation. To be more specific, if you ask a tree who is your neighbor, it will say, my immediate neighbors are air, soil, water, microbes, then comes next tree. The microbes, soil, water, and the air are showing mercy to the trees to sustain life in its fullness. As a fraternity, all creatures and plants are living like good neighbors. No insects can attack them, and also they do not need any artificial fertilizers. Dear friend, everything in nature is a God's creation. All of them have equal rights, just as we enjoy. They are our good neighbors. The environmentalist gave some money to the farmer for his immediate need and went on his way. Jesus asked the expert in law, who is my neighbor? The expert in law replied, that which shows mercy and concern to enrich life. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Whoever destroys nature destroys himself. We believe that God loves creation and wants its life to flourish. No creature is different or lower in God's sight. Every creature has its own dignity and rights because all are included in God's covenant. So it is said in the story of Noah, behold, says God, I establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you and every living creature. Genesis chapter 9, verse 9 to 10. The fundamental human rights come from this covenant with us. The rights of the future generation come from the covenant with our descendants and us. The rights of the nature come from the covenant with our descendants and us and with every living creature. Before God, the Creator, we and our descendants and every living creature are equal partners of God's covenant. Nature is not our property. All living beings must be respected by God's partners in the covenant. Whoever destroys nature destroys him or herself. Revelation chapter 21, verse 1 to 4, chapter 22, verse 1 and 2. We have given new heaven and new earth. The name which is there in the passage, it is an important theological and ecological topic. God, creator, water, and trees for a purpose. The vision of John, recalling us to know what God's purposes in our lives. There is new beginning for a healthy life, which affirms a shalom for every creation. Living water flows into the city, which affirms the guarantee of life. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, there will be no sorrow, no death, which saying that God will conquer and power of death by his creations. Pure, clear crystal water indicate that there will be no factory wastage, which mixing it into the river water and making that into poisons for all living beings. The pure water coursing down the centers of Main Street denoted us that there is a city with best water management planning and allowing the tree of life in each side of the city. With that pure water, They will get 12 crops of fruit, which is organic and no need to put pesticides. Chemical-free fruits are available for that particular month. Nowadays, we are producing fruits for all the years for which we added chemicals to preserve. But in Revelation chapter 22, getting fruits for that particular month, need-based cultivation, which gives us a healthy life. Nations will get medicine, not for individuals, but for the whole universe. The water of life produces health, strength wherever it goes. In the well-being of all creation, He will be the center of life. God will be with us. Then there will be no curse, death, sorrow, cry, and pain. New heaven and new earth will begin. As a church, we should work forward to make this new heaven and new earth the prophetical vision into the missional vision. For the older world and its evils are gone forever. Bible urges us, go into the whole world and proclaim the good news to the whole creation. How will we proclaim the good news to the whole creation when there is no water to drink? As per scientific predictions, by 2070, one human being will have only 2 glasses of water to drink per day. By 2035, Ganga, Brahmaputra, and Indus rivers will disappear. Yes, climate change is going to affect all creations of God. A scorching heat wave in India killed more than 1,500 people in 2050 as temperatures soared above 47 degrees Celsius. Climate change is foremost among these challenges, as global warming is causing ocean levels to rise. According to the International Panel of Climate Change, global sea level are rising at an increased rate, which is projected to be even greater this century. When global temperature warms, seawater expands and occupies more space. Sea level rise when ice melts as well. Coastal communities in every country are then threatened with floods and storm surges, to which these small islands are most exposed. India may experience a 4.4 degree Celsius rise by the end of the century. India has also suffered 2 of the 10 most expensive climate disasters in the last 2 years. Super cyclone Amphan that hit India in 2020 cost more than $13 billion, even as the country was recovering from June-October monsoon flooding. That cost $10 billion and around 1,600 lives. It was India's heaviest monsoon rain in the last 25 years and world's 7th costliest. In early 2021, India suffered 2 more cyclones. Cyclone Tauktae hitting the west coast and Cyclone Yas from the east. According to the International Displacement Monitoring Center, India's internally displaced populations are rising due to the damaging climate events. Uttarakhand residents began deserting their homes after the Kedarnath floods in 2013 due to heavy precipitation that increases every year. By 2050, rainfall is expected to rise by 6% and the temperature by 1.6 degrees Celsius. To make things worse, India lost about 235 square meters of land due to coastal erosion due to climate change induced sea level rise, land erosion, natural disasters such as tropical cyclones between 1990 and 2016. About 3.6 million out of 170 million living in coastal areas were displaced between 2000 and 2018. Recent figures are more alarming, with 3.9 million displaced in 2020 alone, primarily due to the cyclone Amphan. India's Deccan Plateau has seen 8 out of the 17 severe droughts since 1876 in the 21st century. That is 2000 to 2003, 2015 to 2018. In Maharashtra and Karnataka, the heart of the Deccan Plateau, families deserted their homes in 2019 due to an acute water crisis. People of India who are vulnerable to the effects of climate change have done least to cause it, because the climate change is a global phenomenon. We are asking developed countries to stop morally wrong and misguided development paradigm which they are following with fossil fuels. The second major reason for regarding climate change as a justice issue is that it comes at a time when world's richest nations have reached a peak of development, while developing nations are still struggling to get onto the development ladder. While it is well within the means of rich countries to maintain their current levels of economic activity while adapting to climate change, the picture is very different for developing countries. Climate change impacts development programs across the board, from disaster risk reduction to food security and health. The injustice that has brought this suggests that a theological approach to climate change must be rooted in the wider theology and ethics of development, rather than treated as an extension of Christian environmentalism. Global warming is increasing. Amount of carbon dioxide has crossed 400 parts per million. Now it is around 420 parts per million. 200 years ago, it was 280 parts per million. Hurricanes, cyclones, earthquakes, droughts, floods are now frequent. In the carbon economy, this is inevitable. We have to foresee the end of a carbon economy. The church should act as a catalyst in building up a new sustainable economy. Indeed, church could not bring out such a new economic order that involves political, economic, social, and other dimensions. Church should have an ecological vision of the new society that should emerge, and it shall come to pass afterwards that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Joel chapter 2, verse 28. Carbon fast is a challenge to us to look at our daily actions, to reflect on how the impact on the environment. It challenges us to take some small steps, some of which will reduce our carbon dioxide output, while others will help the environment for a sustainable world. In the process, we come to rediscover a different relationship with God, with His creation, with one another. Most of the CSA congregations belong to the communities that are vulnerable to the climate change. We create awareness on climate justice at the congregation level in these dioceses. This is a verse from Genesis 45, chapter 5 to 7. Chapter 45, verse 5 to 7. This is Joseph to his brothers. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will not be plowing and reaping. Do not be angry with yourselves for sending me here. God sent me ahead of you to save lives by great deliverance. Like Joseph, church has been selected by God as ecological prophet. Pharaoh and Joseph had 70 years. Millions of species, including human, whose homes are at risk due to climate conflict, loss, and damage. Like Joseph, we have to draft plans, implement green protocol in our church and organizations, advocacy in reducing global warming. We urge ecological activities form an integral part of the pastoral ministry of the church. Christians cannot be indifferent to deforestation, global warming, pollution, natural resources, depletion, species extinctions, and habitat destruction, all of which threaten life on our planet. Because so many of these threats are driven by greed, we must also actively seek to create more compassionate and sustainable economies that support the well-being of God's creation. Whoever injures the dignity of animals injures God. We should consider Earth as a single complex system, as a living organism. Every subsystem is linked to all other subsystems through the blowing of winds, oceans, the migration of species, the cycles of growth, maturation, aging, and death. Utilizing the air we breathe, we are united with all animals, plants, vehicles, factories, and industrial chimneys. Hence, we must build an economy that will support, not undermine, future generations. As an organized body, church can work as a catalyst for sustainable economic transformation. Green church movements are for building up a sustainable economy to protect the rights of future generations. The pandemic period is the right time to think of a sustainable economy. Summary. God has given habitat for every creation in this universe. The current climate crisis is accelerating the ecological instability, which results in the loss of habitats that are homes for millions of species. We have to repent and transform. Earth is a living body. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together with it. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 26. If any part of the earth suffers, all suffer together. Fossil fuel based, automobile centered, throwaway economy is not a viable model for the world. Alternative is a solar, hydrogen energy economy. Church should have an ecological vision of the new society that should emerge. Thank you very much. These are the assignments. Is it possible for you to retell a parable of Jesus in the background of the present ecological crisis? Is it possible for you to write a pulpit sermon on climate justice from any verse in the Bible? So thank you very much for participating.